Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am your instructor and host. My name is Dr. Nelson Garais, and this is Bio 117, Anatomy and Physiology 2. And this is for all those people who couldn't make the last couple of hours of Friday, June 10, and also to welcome two new students who will be a nice addition to our Bio 117 class. And this is also for you as well. A quick kind of re-lecture and synopsis of what we did, because Friday, we finished kind of early, but, got to get your money's worth. So we just moved on to work on to the next chapter. And the first chapter we'll be doing today on Monday, chapter 14, 15, and 16. Now, if you if you look at modules, and then you open up modules and then you scroll down and you'll find Unit 1 lectures, and then you'll find chapter 14 PowerPoint. Nice place to start. Okay, slideshow, let's start it. And we're going to be talking about blood today. Now, I'm not going to do the entire lecture, and I'm going to probably re-lecture it, but again, re-lecture some points, but again, watch this video with the understanding that, yes, we're going to go back over it again, and this will be included on Wednesday's quiz, chapter 14 and 15. So when we look at blood, okay, we already know from previous lectures, or maybe some of you already know about the functions of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Now, to review, the function of platelets, they're the smallest, right? They're not even actually whole cells, they're fragments of cells. And the function of platelets is for clotting. We have a closed system. We start off with 5 liters and we're going to end up with 5 liters. So the platelets make sure of homeostasis, also known as hemostasis, making sure that we start off with 5 liters of blood and end up with 5 liters of blood. Red blood cells, biconcave disc. We're going to talk more about what that means later. And there's nothing in the middle except for hemoglobin. And their main function is to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. And you'll see here, you have 3 gases that are in your plasma: nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. The 2 to focus on is oxygen and carbon dioxide. Lastly is your white blood cells to round out your formed elements, roughly 45% of your total blood. And your white blood cells have 5 categories. The first 3 categories are called granulocytes because they have granules inside their cytoplasm, and they serve similarly to peroxisomes and lysosomes from the previous chapters, where these vesicles aid in phagocytosis of foreign body, bacteria, viruses, and such. So those are your granulocytes. Neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. We'll be talking a little bit more about them shortly. Then the 2 other classifications of white blood cells, also known as leukocytes. You have your granulocytes here. Your monocytes and your lymphocytes are agranulocytes, so they don't have any granules inside their cytoplasm. And within the lymphocytes, there's T and B lymphocytes, or T cells and B cells. We're going to talk more about them later as well. Now, what's the fluid portion of your blood, which is about, a little bit more than half of your blood is fluid. And the liquid portion of blood is called your plasma. The formed elements are your cellular elements, or, the dry part. So this is the wet part. So we have electrolytes, water, proteins, and the 3 proteins that are of interest is albumin, that has something to do with water balance in your body. Globulins, which is a generalized term for proteins, but the ones that we mentioned in lecture today are immunoglobulins. They are in your plasma, and they have a lot to do with your immune system and the chemical signaling that we're going to be talking about when we talk about your immune system and your white blood cells. And last but not least, fibrinogen. And fibrinogen is the protein, ogen, meaning creation of fibrin, fibers, to combine with the platelets and for clotting. So that's important. You have nutrients, vitamins, and hormones, of course, also in your plasma. And the two gases, excuse me, carbon dioxide and oxygen, which we're going to talk more about carbon dioxide in the near future, because that's actually what your chemoreceptors in your body actually monitor. Remember, we mentioned in the cerebrospinal fluid, it's not the oxygen content, it's the carbon dioxide content within your cerebrospinal fluid that directly controls breathing. But more on that in future. Oh, white blood cells, we talked about that. Now, here's another way to look at it as well. Those of you who are phlebotomists, please ignore these pictures. They're highly inaccurate. But we talked about that in class. Let's focus. Now, when you take blood out of a vein, and the vein is superficial, it is deoxygenated blood. And this is what deoxygenated blood looks like. It looks maroon or dark brown. It's not bright red. And it's that color because the majority of the hemoglobin in your venous blood is carries carbon dioxide, hence the term deoxygenated blood. Now, this deoxygenated blood is colored maroon. Now, when we take it and put it in a centrifuge, and when we spin it down, normally plasma would be a little bit over than half. You'll have a buffy coat, which includes platelets and white blood cells, but the majority of your cells, or the cellular or the dry components, or the formed elements of your blood, is red blood cell. Now, we also mentioned the term hematocrit, and that term deals with the hydration status of your patient. So if there's way too much plasma, that means my patient is overhydrated, and that's not good. If there's too little plasma, that means my patient is dehydrated, which is also equally not good for our patient. Hematopoiesis, the formation of blood cells, we already learned that in previous chapters, that it occurs in your joints, not joints, in your bones, sorry. Hematopoiesis, specifically in your red marrow. So hematopoietic, hemocytoblasts, hematopoietic stem cells, those are the precursor cells. And of course, lymphoid gives rise to lymphocytes, right, which are the granulocytes of your white blood cells, myeloid cell, all the other white blood cell types. And we saw them in that chart a moment ago. Now, your red blood cells have these things has a protein in the middle of it called hemoglobin. If it has a lot of oxygen, hemoglobin is called oxyhemoglobin. If it doesn't have a lot of oxygen, has a lot of carbon dioxide, it is now termed deoxyhemoglobin. The red blood cells are anucleated and have no nuclei and no mitochondria. They cannot divide, so after they die, they have to be recycled. And ATP through glycolysis, nice to know. But know that hemoglobin, very important. It's where the carbon dioxide and oxygen sit and get transported. And that's the main function of the red blood cell, is to transport. The shape is called a biconcave disc, as you can see here, because this has a concave and the bottom part has a concave shape. And you can see it's anucleated and there's no nucleus in here. And what's in here, though, is your hemoglobin, which is your blood protein, and it's associated with the heme group and iron. And with that, that's how you hold oxygen and carbon dioxide, among other things. Now, when my oxygen level runs low, you could read this, right? Apoptosis, or average lifespan of a red blood cell, we mentioned it on multiple occasions in BIO112, is around 120 days or so. If I don't have enough carrying capacity of blood or blood cells, that's called anemia, right? And if my oxygen can't get to where it needs to go, that's called shock. Now, here's a lovely picture that we went over in class. That's, it's pretty important because it teaches you a whole bunch of things and it could lead to a whole bunch of potential exam questions. So the impetus or the starting point of when do we need erythropoietin in our life is when we have low blood oxygen. That will signal the liver and kidney to release this chemical here, erythropoietin, which goes in our bloodstream, ends up in the red marrow of the bones, signals the red marrow of the bones to make red blood cells. The negative feedback is once the oxygen carrying capacity goes up, we have higher or more normal blood oxygen, then the signal to release erythropoietin from liver and kidney stops. Hence the red color, negative, that will be what? Negative feedback, negative inhibition, or inhibition/negative feedback. Here's a quick example of sickle cell disease. If you see here, it's not a good confirmation to carry something. So think of like if I took a lifesaver or those big rings that's and I break it in half, the person won't be able to sit in it, or the oxygen and carbon dioxide won't be able to sit in it. So you could see the trouble that it would cause for your sickle cell patient anemia. Or if there was iron deficiency, what would happen to the hemoglobin in the middle of this, right? It would not hold the oxygen and carbon dioxide very well. And then it would have a whole bunch of pathologic problems associated with that. So hemoglobin, there's 4 subgroups, nice to know. And there's heme groups that are related to iron. So this is what it looks like in its tertiary structure or 3D structure. You can see here, there's like a heme group that's iron and like 4 kind of really twisted lawn chairs, one here, one here, one here, one here. And those will be able to sit either oxygen or carbon dioxide. So if it's oxygen, it's oxyhemoglobin. If it's more carbon dioxide, it's carboxyhemoglobin. This one we skipped over, nice to know. And it's got a lot of things that we're going to go over in other chapters and in other perspectives. So skip over this one. Now, white blood cells, we already know the function of your white blood cells, also known as leukocytes. WBC in capital letters means white blood count, last time I remember. It's WBC in lower case letters means white blood cell. And I believe that's in your Davy Ellen Chabner book of your medical terminology. We already mentioned granulocytes versus agranulocytes. You have lymphocytes and monocytes in the agranulocyte world. Neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. Now, what do white cells can do? They can do something called diapedesis. Dia means complete or thorough. Peds means to walk. So it can completely walk through and squeeze through capillary walls of a blood vessel and actually move towards an infection site. Now, how does it do that? Well, first, there's positive chemotaxis. There's some sort of chemical attraction that gets released from the area of infection, right? Or the area of damaged cells. And then once they're there, they can stick. They could, and that's through cellular adhesion molecules. They stick to whatever needs to be phagocytosed or engulfed, right? And then they release their, their contents of their cytoplasm, and then it breaks down and then recycles everything. There's a nice little picture of diapedesis. Sorry if I'm going too fast. You can, of course, pause at home. So you can see here, right? You have some damage, right? The bacteria, the damage will start doing what? They'll start releasing chemical signals that to warn your whole body of the damage. And also there's going to be nociceptors that tell your body this is painful, go deal with this. Now, injured cells, we're going to talk about histamine, and the blood vessels are going to be dilate and get very leaky. Remember, that's what histamine does. It makes everything more leaky, more prone to edema, and it makes sense. I have this splinter here with a whole chock full of bacteria, most of it probably not really from the dirty splinter, but probably from your skin in the form of Staphylococcus aureus, and it's going to infect this area. So flooding this area out and making it all gummy, and it'll give your body the ability to kind of contain that infection within that place. And that's actually the function of inflammation. That's why you have swelling. That's why you have pain. That's why there's redness. That's why it's also warm to the touch. You could see a lot of blood rolling around there. So looking at neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, monocytes, and whatnot, you can do that, right? But we had a chart, and differential, all the different white blood cells, and I'm going to pick a chart that's similar to, or if the same one that I picked. There you go. So if we're looking at this chart, you have your granulocytes, and you see there's granules in them: basophil, eosinophil, and neutrophil. Okay, and then you have your two agranulocytes, lymphocytes, and monocytes. So if you look further down, and this is I also have a nice thing here as well. Where is it? Where's the chart? Because this might confuse you. Let me try to find that chart. Maybe if I type the word chart. Where is it? Was it this one? Have patience with me. You can fast forward. Let's try this chart. Is this the chart that I talked? I thought I saved it, but I didn't. Differential. Maybe if I type the word functions. No. Yep, this is it. Let's look at this chart. Knew I'd find it. Give it time. Of course they won't. So we can look at it at this level. So when I'm looking at this, if you have neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, those are your granulocytes. If you have a preponderance or there's too many neutrophils, then you're going to think what? There's a lot of phagocytosis going on, and most likely it's a bacterial infection. If there's a bunch of eosinophils, I want you to think allergic reaction. If it's a bunch of basophils, then I'm going to think inflammation is out of hand. Think mast cells, think heparin, think histamine. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. Now, B and T cells, those are memory cells and T helper cells. We're going to talk more about in a minute. And monocytes, they're the things that transform into macrophages. And we mentioned before that macrophages perform phagocytosis. And remember, monocytes and macrophages, they're thugs. They don't have too many brains. It needs the immune system to tell them, hey, kill this guy or kill that guy or that guy. And we're going to talk about antigen presenting cells and how does that work. So right off the bat, if we look at our differential, neutrophils think what? Bacterial infection. Eosinophils think allergic reaction. Basophils think mast cells, think inflammation. So if my patient has pericarditis, they're going to have an influx or an increase of basophils. Let's now talk about the difference between B cells and T cells. Just real quick, because there was a little bit some confusion on Friday regarding what are B cells, what are T cells, and what do they do. So B cells, I want you to think B, it says bursa, it's called bursa equivalent, but I want you to think they're from bones. Okay, that's the easiest way to look at it, right? Derivative of bones. And we know that because in the red marrow of your bones, in the spongy bone, we know that hematopoiesis or the production of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are done there. So B cells. Now, what do? A B cell remembers what it attacked last time, so that the second time around, for example, that the virus is going to get eaten up much quicker because the antibody will get to it. So think B cell, think what? Memory. It's seen the trouble before and can get to the trouble and identify the trouble and phagocytize that trouble much faster. Now, what's T cells? Now, T cells recognize an infected cell. And who recognizes the infected cell? You have something called a T helper, also known as a CD4 plus cell. Your cytotoxic T cell, also known as a T killer, is called your CD8 cell. Now, the CD4 cell, let's have a better picture of that. If you look at this, right? Let's say this is the bad thing. This is the antigen. This is the thing that's going to start trouble. Let's say it's like this little dot here. Let's say it's a virus or something. And then you have an antigen presenting cell that's going to do what? Hook up with this thing along with your T helper cell. And it's going to say what? It's going to send chemicals out and it's going to tell things, hey, we have to kill this. So who's going to come? It goes to the rescue. Macrophage is going to hear the chemical call, right? And it's going to come and kill that thing. T killer, also known as T cytotoxic cell or CD8 cells, they're going to come and kill that thing. And also, the T helper cell is also going to call out to the B cells. And we already know B cells are the memory cells, and they have antibodies that are specific. So that's what antigen presenting is. The antigen is the thing that starts the trouble, or the thing that doesn't belong, the thing that needs to get killed, right? And you have a CD4 cell, T helper, right? And it acts as an antigen presenting cell for this antigen. And then what do you got? The T killer then kills it. Macrophage then kills it. Then B cells send message to the antibody, and then what? Kills it. So you could see now in the face of HIV, unfortunately, in AIDS, HIV, the virus likes to attack CD4 cells. So if we didn't have anybody blowing the whistle on this antigen here, on this trouble, then no one's going to come and help. There'll be no antibodies released. There'll be no macrophage on the way, and T killer won't kill anybody. Because remember, the T killer, are they smart? No. Macrophage, are they any smart? No. They need to be told chemically what to do and who to go kill. Or in our term, not kill, but phagocytize. Okay. Let me find, where's the PowerPoint? What happened to the PowerPoint? Desktop, Zoom. Okay, let's go back to this. I don't want any notes. And we're on still chapter 14. Okay, and we're back. So that's what these are. These notes, nice. If you have way too much white blood cell, that's leukocytosis. Greater than 10,500 count per microliter. And if you have low white blood count, that's, you don't have to memorize this, just know that high white blood count, leukocytosis. Low blood count, leukocytopenia or leukopenia, either way. Platelets, they get signaled by hemocytoblasts in response to thrombopoietin. If thrombo means clot, poietin means the production of a clot. Remember, the function of platelets is to keep your body in hemostasis, meaning, I start off with the day with 5 liters, I'm going to end up with 5 liters. Most important blood gas, remember, oxygen and carbon dioxide. That's gas exchange. That's what's most important to us. We talked about, remember the categories of lipids and fats, triglycerides. And we briefly talked about cholesterol, the differences between high density lipoprotein, low density lipoprotein, very low density lipoprotein. High density lipoprotein is the protein vehicle to take fat out of your body. And your LDL and your VLDL is the protein vehicle to take fat into your body. So it is in our best interest to maximize the HDL or the good cholesterol, right? Good scores like 50, 55 around there. But I want to minimize the LDL and the VLDL, right? And the only way to do that, of course, is diet, proper diet and nutrition. We'll talk more about these electrolytes, but we already talked about sodium, turns things on. Potassium turns things off. We already heard about calcium, turns things on. So think on, calcium, sodium, think off, potassium, and we'll expand upon that simplistic view in the weeks to come. Now, we mentioned in class about the right way to kill yourself versus the wrong way. Again, for the record, I am not promoting suicide, nor am I making light of it. Just know and understand that if you cut a blood vessel, if you cut it crossways, right, not long ways, the blood vessel should be able to, if it's small enough, close itself off, and that's called vascular spasm, because blood vessels, especially arteries, have a thick tunica media. Tunica is coating or jacket. The thick middle jacket of arteries are filled with visceral or smooth muscle. So triggering anything, any pain receptors, or significant loss of oxygen, it is going to release the signal for vasoconstriction. And the signal for vasoconstriction is serotonin. We already went over what norepinephrine does. We already know what acetylcholine does. And now we can add serotonin to the mix, because we already know serotonin, it causes vasoconstriction to help reduce the blood loss. But we also know serotonin also gets released in response to pain. So it makes sense. I'm in pain. I want to get that blood loss down, but I also don't want to feel a lot of that pain. So you can see serotonin come into play there. Serotonin causes vasoconstriction. Serotonin also with enkephalin and endorphin are also pain sensory inhibitors. So they tone down the nociceptor so that you can just deal with the problem at hand. platelet plug. Remember we talked about fibrinogen, takes these fibers, and then it gets sticky, and then it's able to do what? If it's sticky, it like, it seals off the break in the blood vessel. Now, plasma and serum. Serum is what we call plasma when we take out the fibrinogen and clotting factors out of it. And I think this is where we were. Slide 36 when we ended, because I don't remember going through these parts. But for completion of the video, let me just run through the rest of these slides. So what's a thrombus? It's a blood clot, and it's abnormal. It's too much, and it's usually sticking out of the side and gumming up our blood vessel. Now, when that, the artery is under high pressure, so when the high pressure kicks up and breaks off that thrombus, then something dangerous called an embolus happens. That means you got a blood clot now floating around your blood vessels. And that blood clot, do you think it can now cause some sort of infarction or a blocked blood vessel? And we know it as myocardial infarction, and then you'll have death or necrosis of tissues. So an MI, or also known as myocardial infarction, is also known as a heart attack. And I don't want that thrombus to break off and that embolus to form, and it causes a lot of problems. An embolism or thrombosis in your brain is called a stroke, also known as a CVA, or cerebrovascular accident. The other term, hardening of your arteries. Now, when you were a kid, your arteries are nice and clear. That's why your blood pressure is in the basement when you're a kid. What's a typical blood pressure of a 10-year-old? It's what? I don't know, 70 over 40, some ridiculous number. But as you grow older, what happens? Damage. There's fat that lines it of all the nachos and beer you ate over a lifetime. And then some clotting. And then what happens? Form some thrombosis, some damage. and that fat combined with the thrombosis is going to make the fat very hard. Hence the term atherosclerosis. Now, blood typing. We got to pause on that, on blood typing. Let's look at this chart. Now, when it's like A positive, A negative, or AB, O positive, the positive is, or negative is the RH type. So get the positive or negative out of your head. Just think a person can either be A, B, AB, and O. Okay? A person can either be A, B, AB, or O. Now, remember we talked about the antigen? The antigen is a thing on a cell, or a cell itself, that starts trouble. And I talked about in class how the antigen coding or the glycoprotein coat on a cell identifies the cell either as self or foreign. So of course, if I have A blood, what kind of antigen will I have in my red blood cell? It'll be A. So the coat will have the big letter A on it. But I also have B cells that make antibodies that get rid of foreign things. The B cells are memory cells, make antibodies, and that's called, and someone with A blood is going to have antibodies against B, or antibodies called anti-B. Now that you know that, then B has to have what kind of coat? B antigen, and they have to be anti-A. That's the reason why if I give A blood to a B patient, their anti-A will start attacking the antigen on that A blood, and that's not a good thing. And then your patient's going to get serum sickness. Now, someone with AB blood has both antigens, and they don't have any antibodies. So this person, since they have both antigens, they have both jackets, they can be the universal recipient. So if I give them A, they won't get bothered because there's nothing to attack A. If I give an AB person B, there's nothing to attack. So they're cool with it. Now, O doesn't have any antigens. So if it has nothing to start any trouble, then you can give O to what? Anybody, right? So O becomes the universal donor. So if you don't get this part, and I know I was going a little bit fast and we're gonna slow it down, watch YouTube videos regarding the ABO blood typing group and see, and I believe there's an online game somewhere that I used to, and I'll show you guys it on Monday if it still exists. Okay. So that's blood typing. Now, when there is an immune response, meaning, let's say, for example, antigen and antibody meet. Well, if antigen and antibody meet, guess what's going to happen? A fight, clumping. And that clumping is called agglutination. And that means that's an immune response and it's something that I don't want. Type O, universal donor. Type AB, universal recipient. And here's the permissible blood types. Right, we'll talk more about that. Now, let's talk now about this plus or minus thing. This plus or minus thing is not part of the ABO blood typing group. It's part of your rhesus group, or known as RH. RH positive means that my patient has the presence of D antigen. So if I am B positive, therefore I have ABO blood type group B, that's one grouping, and I am RH positive. If I am A negative, that means I am part of ABO blood type group A, and I'm negative, that means I do not have the any RH antigens on my red blood cell. Okay. Now, this is a concern to us regarding RH compatibility of mommy and baby, because when mommy and baby share blood, let's say the RH compatibility, mommy has a whole bunch of negatives and baby has positive blood. Well, guess what's going to happen? Let's see. Maybe I should draw. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go to share and let's go to the whiteboard. Let's draw. So let's say I'm going to draw mommy. And mommy is negative. Now, it's a problem with RH. So baby one has what? Positive blood. Now, that's okay, because baby one will sensitize mommy to this positive blood. Therefore, right, she'll have antibodies, memory cells that will remember this positive blood. Now, the problem isn't with the first baby. The problem is with the subsequent pregnancy. Let's draw mommy again. We know mommy has negative blood. Now, the second baby, let's say by really sheer bad luck, now has also positive blood. Now, you guys know that in theory, the blood's supposed to be separate. Baby's and mommy's blood don't really mix, but in reality, they do. So if mommy has RH negative, baby has RH positive blood, right? What's going to happen to the second baby? The second baby is going to get sick, right? And the second baby is going to get jaundice because the blood, mommy's blood, RH negative, and baby's RH positive are going to fight each other. And you're going to have agglutination, you're going to have clumping, and that's not a good thing. All right, so it's not the first baby who gets hit, it's the second baby who gets hit, and erythroblastosis fetalis, right? Erythroblast, right? The red blood cells are going to get what? The young ones are going to get affected. And it's what? Fetal blood, erythroblastosis, abnormal condition, fetal blood. Okay, so let's now go share back to normal. And I think that's it for chapter 14. So start looking at what kind of questions can look good for Wednesday. And again, I'll see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend.